the voice that I had inside of me was like, you're going to become something and you're going to prove them all wrong. Like that was the thing that drove me when I was a kid.
Wow.
When I was in that classroom and all those teachers used to bully me or make fun of me on a regular basis, I used to go in my mind like, you're going to see. I am sitting on my floor in my flat in Peckham and I'm crying because I'm looking at my mortgage statement and I look at my balance statement and they don't add up.
I'm blown away because on the outside, we're looking and we see, wow, 1.4 million views, incredible TED Talk, it blows up, changes someone's life. And behind the scenes, we hear the story. It's so relatable.
I was fed up of entrepreneurship being glorified when it actually was really hard. I just felt very inadequate in comparison to a lot of the stuff that I was seeing online. Like I was struggling to make ends meet. I wasn't getting as many clients as I thought I would. It was like working all the time, but no fun. All this stuff that just didn't felt was being talked about enough. And so, yeah, with 10 days to go, I just scrapped everything and rewrote this new speech.
All right, we are live. Welcome back to the Story Vault podcast. Today I've got a very special guest on. I'm very excited for this one. CEO of Storycast, founder of award-winning podcast, The Unconventionalist, and author of best-selling book, Glow in the Dark, which we're going to jump in today on a mission to inspire 1 million people, founders, CEOs, entrepreneurs, and anyone else that fits the mold to inspire people with their story, to build trust and inspire action. Mark Leruste, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. And first of all, congrats on pronouncing my name properly. I've got to say that's really kudos. That's really like you jumped over the first hurdle, so well done.
Yes, I made it. I'm guessing, have you been on a couple of podcasts?
How many times did you practice that? How many times did you practice that? Did you
Mark,
listen to like...
I've been here all morning, about 3 hours, sitting here in front of the mirror. Leruste.
You know, I always say this. It's like the way they remember it is like the roost is on fire. I don't know if you've ever heard that song. Like
nice.
The roof. Yeah, that's the way that people
What's
remember
the worst pronunciation you've got of that? So
Oh,
far?
like
have
I've
you
had
ever
it
had
so-
like
like
a
you-
really bad one?
Well, Leruste, Leruste. You know, I mean, it's a dodgy name.
It's a
It's
hit and
French.
miss.
Nobody's perfect, right? So yeah, my dad's French. So, yeah, I just never. I guess never expected when I was a kid I'd have to figure out how to pronounce my name. You know, when I'm on stages around the world. So, but you know, here we are.
Nice. No, I made it. I got the first hurdle, so there we go. It's going to be a winner already. We already know. So first of all, I just want to say thanks for coming on. You know, obviously, I first came across you, of course, from your infamous TED Talk that, you know, took off, and just been following your journey since. And, you know, you've been a big inspiration, man. Like, just the way you've pioneered a different path throughout your own life and the message you carry so passionately on your sleeve and that clearly drives you to make the change and do what you do. It's just, you know, I've learned a lot and been inspired. So it's a pleasure to have you. And first of all, just want to thank you and honor you.
Thank you. I'm humbled and I appreciate your words.
All right, let's go. Let's jump in. I thought for this one, you know, because, you know, you've done a lot of podcasts. You delve into storytelling a lot, storytelling in business, the practicals, the how-tos. And as much as I love that, there are loads of podcasts for people to check out. But I wanted to just delve into Mark Leruste, the person. And that's what we're about on the Story Vault, going into people's
vault,
crores.
AKA the vault.
There we
It's
go.
like,
We're going in.
What have you got hidden in the vault?
Yeah. We're opening it up, opening up the safe, cracking the safe.
Yeah.
And I thought it'd be fun because, you know, you're known for the storytelling, and obviously you have a story. So I just thought it'd be great to jump into your story and unpack, I guess, the lessons and things you've discovered and uncovered about life, success, business, the lot. We'll just flow with it. So I'm excited. But first of all, my special intelligence tells me that there is this effect that I need to learn, apparently. So apparently this very special effect that you have, and apparently I need to know more about it. What is the Rusty effect?
Oh, so the Rusty effect was a nickname that was given. So first of all, my nickname Rusty was given to me when I joined the Movember Foundation as team Europe employee number 3, because there's already someone who was called Mark at Movember.com, so I couldn't have Mark at Movember.com. So either I could have Mark L at Movember.com
no way.
or Mark Leruste. Yeah, and it was just, I didn't want to spend my whole time on the phone saying it's Mark L, no, it's MARKL at Movember. Anyway, so they said, come up with, what's your middle name? And my middle name's Andre. And they're like, oh, we could call you Andre. And I was like, that's my grandfather. It's just a bit weird. And then someone, I think it was Pablo, whose real name was Dan, by the way. He's also been through that process and was given the name Pablo. And so I still know him as Pablo. But anyway, so Pablo was like, Rusty, because Leruste, Rusty. And so Rusty was my nickname, and that's how everybody at Movember still calls me to this day, Rusty. And apparently when I used to go out and party, the bad Rusty would come out, but that's another conversation. So the
Part
Rusty effect
two.
was when it was a kind of a joke that when I'd go into market, and because we'd spend about 2 to 3/4 of our time on the road, it was very much like a sort of a ambassador, if you want, for like being a mustache, like a professional billboard or like a mustache farmer. And so I'd go around. I launched the Movember Foundation in France and in Switzerland, and then helped grow it in Spain and Belgium. And so I'd go into markets and I'd, talk at companies, the Googles, the Barclays, the Amazon of the worlds and Gillettes and that kind of stuff. But I would also go into communities, sports teams, co-working spaces, bars, like you just name it, right? Anywhere I could go and talk, even Ubisoft, shout out to the Ubisoft crew in France. And the registration, so we would call them regos. Registrations is when someone is signing up to either show an intent of taking part in the Movember Foundation, so whether they're going to do an event to raise money or grow a moustache or support the cause in some way, they would sign up, right? So registrations were very important to us. And so on the lead up to the Movember campaign, so Movember, for those who don't know, is the concoction of the word November and moustache, or Mo, because Mo is a slang for moustache in Australia. Is Movember is the month of the year where sort of men around the world and women and anything in between take part to support the cause around men's health issues, specifically prostate cancer, testicular cancer, mental health, so suicide prevention and physical inactivity. And so I'd go out there in the market and I would just share the story of Movember and why I was passionate about it. And I just had a questionable moustache, a backpack, and a story. And the joke was the Rusty effect, as you would see when I'd go into market, the spikes in registrations on the back end.
That's amazing.
Of the admin console. But it was, it happened with everyone who went out into market. But it was kind of the joke. My manager Bill was like, look at the Rusty effect, and that was where the nickname came.
That's amazing. I love that. That's got to be a highlight. Highlight moment. Stick it on the wall. The Rusty effect. I like that. Do you think that was from? And we're going to delve a bit earlier in a minute, but I'm really curious. Do you think that was purely because of, because I know before that, right, you were already traveling around the world interviewing, ministers of defense, entrepreneurs, CEOs.
Yeah.
So you were interviewing a lot of people. You've obviously picked up some phenomenal communication skills. Do you think it was solely because of ability, or do you think also you just had a massive passion for what you were doing and that was just seeping out of those moments?
I don't actually think it was ability, to be honest with you. I think
Really?
you're right. Well, yes and no, right? Like, I think, yes, obviously I've had a lot of practice to interview. It was different. The job that you're referring to is my first job out of uni. 3 days after uni, I joined this company where I interviewed sort of movers and shakers of the world and decision makers and politicians and business leaders and all that kind of stuff. And I was 22, and I was supposed to go into a room with the Minister of Finance, and I failed my quantitative math exam 3 times in a row. So I am so bad, right, at accounting and finance, still to this day. My accountant's still, I'm like, look, we made this money. He's like, right, but have you seen how much you're spending? And I'm like, no, but it doesn't matter. Look how much money I make. So it was just like this weird situation I was in. But what I realized with Movember is actually what I think it was. It was more my enthusiasm and my passion for the cause and my shared belief in the mission. I think because of my personal story that linked to the cause itself, when I went through a bit of a depression and I felt down and I felt there was no real avenue to turn to, I felt very alone. I didn't feel like there was any language out there that spoke to me. And I felt like Movember created that space for men to come together and talk about how they were doing in a non sort of threatening way and in non-native language to men, I think, in a way. So I really loved that aspect. But there's this sentence I've been playing with, which I heard, and I didn't invent this sentence. The guy who first said it I forgot his name, it's Dan. He was one of the guys who's behind Mr. Beast's philanthropy YouTube channel. And he also did Cassie Neistat's videos for a while. He's a South African incredible film director. And he said, interested is interesting. And I really love that. Like I'm kind of grabbing that with both hands and running with it. It's like interested is interesting. And I was just the way that I would talk about something. And I think that's been one of my superpowers, which I've taken for granted, which I've been trying to teach clients and I teach audiences around the world when I go and speak on stages, this idea that if you can speak with enthusiasm without overwhelming your audience, then you've got a really great hook to get people at least interested in what you're talking about. And so I think because of my passion, because of my enthusiasm that I had for the mission, for the cause, for the work we did, it was contagious, and it had that sort of ripple effect. So I think when you see, and there's a book written by Donald Miller called Blue Like Jazz. It's a Christian memoir kind of book. It was back in his early days. He used to write memoirs, from a Christian, lens and perspective before he got into the small business perspective. But the reason why I bring that up is that there's a sentence that I thought was really interesting. So he said that sometimes you need to see someone who loves something to fall in love with it. And his metaphor was with religion, but really he was talking about his friend with jazz. Like, he didn't get into jazz until his friend spoke enthusiastically about jazz, and then he got it. And that he was making reference about religion being the same thing. Like, sometimes you've got to see someone who's really into their religion to get into it. But I think it's the same thing with anything. Like, if you've got a product or a service that you genuinely believe can solve a problem, that you're, really enthusiastic about the solution that you provide, then there's a way for you to enroll people and engage people through the stories you share and through, the description of products and services that I think have a ripple effect. And somehow are contagious, although that word's slightly virus-like, but it is. I think you can have that sort of magnetic effect.
I love that. Yeah, that's powerful. It's powerful. It's so true. There's something about someone who has become the message in a way. They've become the message, and it's just so magnetic rather than, just relaying information that might be brilliant. So I love that.
Because it's not about you. And it's interesting because it's, I'm victim of this, by the way. So I say this as someone who's very acutely aware that I fall into the trap of doing this sometimes, where I accidentally make myself the hero and I accidentally make it all about me, and I don't intend to, and it's not like my initial intention. But what I've noticed is that when you become the vehicle for a message, when you make it about the message and the audience you serve, not about you looking good, then there is power in that, right? Like I used to say, make your audience more important than you looking good. My friend Dan always says, like, become the spotlight, don't be in the spotlight. And it is that sort of balance, that tightrope that you've got to be both the messenger, but also understand that it's more than just you.
I love that. That's beautiful, powerful. I love it. All right. Where I want to go with a few areas for the time we have today. I want to jump back a bit into who Mark Leruste is as a launch pad for a few things we're going to talk about. And then we're going to talk a bit about your public speaking journey, your book, and a few stories in between. So
yeah, and full transparency, people listening or watching this, Aidan unfortunately got shorthand. I came in late to this conversation. We're supposed to have more time to talk. Fortunately, we don't have as much time as possible, so it is my fault, not Aidan's fault by any means.
It's totally good. We're going to make it even better.
On air.
No, I love it. No problem. We're gonna make it a hit. So let's go right back. And I know we're gonna take a hard left on the M5 right now. But I want to jump into Mark Leruste, who's just come out of school and is hit 18 and is entering the world. Because I know you had a very unique upbringing, right? So born and raised in France, Welsh mother, French father. Speaking a different language at home than you are in the world outside. Obviously grew up dyslexic at the time. Obviously wasn't diagnosed, I believe, officially. So you're at school. And I know you had a really, challenging time. Even teachers, you share, being bullied by teachers because you couldn't spell and, couldn't read out loud and all these things.
God.
Which is crazy. And, I'm just so fascinated by people's, early starts because we're so, well, we are formed so much by those early days, and we either carry them with us or we have to do a load of hard work to undo and fight through some of the stuff we picked up.
So true.
So I know that you even hated school to the point where I think you faked an appendicitis one time because you didn't want to go in. So I'm just so curious after all of, obviously you're, very creative, a pioneer in a way, probably didn't know at the time. It's very new. By the time you're 18, tell me, who is Mark Leruste? How is he seeing the world? What's he viewing as success as he's launched into life?
18 years old, 19. It's weird. My brother always makes fun of me in that way, that I'm a chameleon, that I sort of go through life and adapt to the different environments I'm in. So if you go throughout, my life and you saw pictures of me, if you had to take an identity picture, like, those ID pictures you have or a passport, if you had to take that every 6 months or so throughout my life, you would see very different genres, right? Like very different. So I used to have dreadlocks at one point.
Whoa.
I had shaved head. I thought I was Eminem at one point. Um, so it I think it's taken me a lot of work and therapy to understand a lot of the unpacking that needed to be doing back then. But I think 18, 19, I was very much, I believed I was destined for greatness. Like there's this belief that I had as a kid. It's a coping mechanism. Let's just be real. Like when you go through some sort of trauma, whatever you want to call it, little T trauma, and you have to go through some level of adversity. And again, it's in comparison to my own experience, not to anybody else's who gone through a lot worse than I have. You sort of come up with coping mechanisms and you adapt, right? And so mine was the internal dialogue that I had as a kid when there was no responsible adult around to let me know that what was happening was not okay, or to tell me that it's not because I can't spell, that I can't read, that I'm not worth something, right? Like the voice that I had inside of me was like, you're going to become something and you're going to prove them all wrong. Like that was the thing that drove me when I was a kid.
Wow.
When I was in that classroom and all those teachers used to bully me or make fun of me on a regular basis, I used to go in my mind like, you're going to see. You're going to see. I wanted to be an actor when I was a kid. So back in the primary, I wanted to be an actor. And so in my mind, I was going to be like the next Tom Cruise, the next Brad Pitt. Like you're going to see me on the screen one day, and you're gonna regret everything you said to me and did to me. In fact, what I didn't know is that that very thing is also who shaped me, and it was the fuel that helped me to propel. But it can also become the fire that burns you down, right? So that's the double-edged sword. Will Smith talks about it as well in his book. But it's that double-edged sword of what drives you and what can then destroy you. So by the time I'm 18, 19, so I was held back a year, just for clarity. So I was held back a year when I was around 11 or 12. So I finished my equivalent of GCSEs in France, which is the baccalaureate. But I was kicked out when I was 16 of conventional education and went in a more technical area. And I was told that I wasn't going to get to much. Basically, I was told that, the best you can hope for is, to go and work on a shop floor and if you're lucky or, bin men, whatever it was. And so I wasn't given I wasn't given a lot of aspirational destinations as a kid, especially not in school, that, no mentors, that kind of stuff. But I just had this, it's funny, it's funny to think about it now, but I had this sheer determination of proving people wrong. That was like my number one motivator. And so strangely, I ended up doing okay in my final, A levels, whatever you call them, in the equivalent, the thing that you go before university, right? The exam day before. I did okay. Like it wasn't anything flying colors, but I was pretty much in the top 5 of my class, if not top 2 or 3, I can't remember. But we're talking about a class of people who were averaging like 10 out of 20, right? So we're not exactly talking the most academically driven, let's put it that way. So I end up getting a place at university. And so the idea of getting to university for me was just like the big fat middle finger to everyone to just go like, look, I was meant to be nobody and I'm going to university, and this was not in the stars according to you, but they were according to me. So that was when I was 19. I think I was kind of excited. I go to university, hate my degree, very quickly realized that I don't want to do business. And but I was already held back a year. So my career advisor was like, look, nobody likes their degree anyway. Just get on with it and do lots of stuff on the side that make you happy, and then just get on with it and just finish your degree and go and do whatever you want to do. And so I did. I started, I've talked about this on the podcast and stuff, you can listen to it, but I think, my best friend Naomi Tilly Boncheville, who, I love, and she's like a sister to me. She was a creative director, and she always said, you're one of the most creative people I know. And I always find that very difficult to hear. She's like, you're not a creative in the sense of like you're an artist, but like you're a creative. And I've taken some time to look back and reappreciate what creativity means. And I've always had these sort of weird little projects. When I was a kid, I used to buy like secondhand skateboard shoes for like really cheap. I would clean them up, put some new shoelaces, sell them at a higher price. With that money, I would buy more clothes. I was just kind of like the original eBay in a way, or I don't know, Vinted, whatever it was. So I've always found like these little projects. When I was at university, I had the Kent Hip Hop Society is the society that I started. We had 12 board members and like 200 members. It was like nominated for Best New Society of the Year. Yeah, I used to put up these house parties. We used to put up these charity fundraising events, MC battles. We had break dancers, DJs. It was amazing. It was really cool.
Jeez, wow.
When I think about it. And then I had a radio show, and And then the radio show, I kind of brought my friends who I really thought had a real great talent, but not people didn't know them. Well, at least people didn't know as much about them as I thought they should. So I'd bring them in, and they would do their thing. And that got me, I think, the bug around interviewing people, which was set, to be fair, from a young age when I saw my mother interview my grandfather about his time during the Second World War, being a prisoner in working camps. So I think that seed was planted there, but that's when I started interviewing people, getting the bug for that idea of like hearing people's stories, and helping people extract the stories out of them and find the nuggets and share them and give them that comfort and guidance. Yeah, that's when it started. And yeah, the rest is history. I kind of finished university with a 2-1 for people outside the UK system. It's like the second best grade you can get for me, which was insane. It was so insane because I should have never got a 2-1, a third at best.
Proud moment.
Yeah, it was. I think it's one of those it definitely is one of those peak experiences moments where every time I go back to that moment where I'm inside the library at my university, leaning forward, and back in the day, they used to have the results printed on a piece of paper behind these glass sort of windows, and you would lean in and you'd see your name and you'd see your end result, and it got 2-1, and it was very special. Yeah. And that's a long-winded answer, but that's kind of where I was at.
I love that. No, thanks for sharing. An amazing journey. Amazing journey. Before we jump into the next, maybe going into some public speaking stuff, the last question I wanted to ask, just to follow up on this, it just came to my mind, is I'm really curious how so I know that for a lot of people, and it's not anyone's fault, but like you said, it can spill out in two ways, right? So when we experience pain, and real pain in our life, and then we go to prove other people wrong, or prove the labels that we've been given wrong, we want to show people that's not true, and I didn't deserve that, I can be what you just never said I can be. It's interesting, you can see people who that pain, like you said, becomes the fire that burns you. In other words, it can turn you into even though you're driven and you go on to conquer great things and you go and build stuff, there's a heart that's it's hurting, and it's obviously broken, and it can become cynical, it can become angry, it can become judgmental, it can become defensive. So I'm interested for you, and this maybe will be a launch pad into the next question, but is your message and your character is clearly one who is very, you're very emotionally connected, you're very hopeful, you're very driven, you're very encouraging for others, you're very uplifting for other people. In obviously what you do, your public speaking, your client work, your content. So I'm curious, what was it? Because even though your narrative was, I'm going to prove these people wrong, I'm going to take off the labels you've put onto me. How did it develop in a heart of love and kindness, rather than becoming, super broken and cynical? And then Mark Leruste went and built some great stuff, but it was out of pain and judgment. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
So there's a couple of things that comes up. One of them is, not to quote Don Miller again, but there's another book he wrote called Hero on a Mission, and it's really interesting. He talks about how the genesis of a villain and a hero are usually the same. It's usually pain, right? Usually in a story, or in a superhero story, you're going to have the hero and the villain will usually both have some form of origin story that involves pain. The difference is the hero will say, I don't want anybody else to ever feel this pain, and so I'm going to do whatever it takes to make sure that I create a world in which nobody feels this pain. The villain will say, I want to make sure that everybody feels this pain the way that I felt this pain. So that, when you said that question, that came up for me. Like, usually the two journeys that you can take is either you take that pain and you want to make it go away for others, or you want to inflict that pain on others to hopefully make yourself feel better, but it never really does, right? The second thing that came up as you said that is, I think I was quite fortunate to be raised with the parents I had, and and in particular, I had a very soft and gentle father who was loving and caring in his own way. He was not around that much because he worked a lot and he had a passion for music. He was a jazz player, so he moonlighted as a jazz player. So he was playing concerts a lot. He wasn't around. He just rehearsed a lot. But my mom, who is a Christian, and tried to raise me and my brother as Christian. I'm laughing. It's just, I'm not religious now. I'm spiritual, but I'm not religious. I don't believe in a specific doctrine. But she would do, I heard someone say this on a podcast recently, the author of Oh Boys and Men. He said, we believe what we see before we believe what we hear. And I loved that because I think seeing my mum do things, so she would regularly, like, if you could bet your ass that on a Sunday afternoon after church, there'd be some random person sitting at a table who she felt sorry for, or who didn't have like the family around. Like, we had so many of my mum's friends who like came crashing at our place with their kids because they got kicked out by the husband or they're going through a divorce, or like we always had just like these situations, just always people coming over, and always, and my mum would come out of the supermarket and like give bread and tuna and sardines to like a homeless person asking for money. And she's like, I'm not going to give them money because they're going to buy alcohol, but I'll get them some sardines and a baguette, you know? So, so there's always, I think this,
That's sweet.
there was more this idea of like helping others, I think, in that way. And I guess I lucked out by having a kind nature, probably, you know, that plays as well. Like, I think I see it with my kids, you know, I had that, which, and then I got a lot of help and love along the way. You know, I did have people who loved me and helped me. I remember when, you know, this could sound weird, but I had cheated on a partner when I was younger. And up until that point, I didn't really think anything of it. I just didn't, you know, I just thought like people don't know that it doesn't hurt them, right? And she had told me, and I forgot what it was. I must have been 19, 20, something like that. She's like, you know, what you do is not okay. It hurts people. And I just remember going like, oh, yeah. I hadn't really thought about that. I know it sounds silly, but so these little moments of being calibrated, you know, a little bit more. And then I did a lot of therapy. Like, so when I found out that my partner was pregnant, I decided I wanted to do therapy because I wanted to try and unload a lot of the baggage that I got from my
Sure,
parents.
yeah, of
And no
course,
doubt
yeah.
I'll be passing on to my kids. And when you do therapy, something happens, something shifts in you. Like, you can tell people who've gone through therapy and people who haven't, in the sense that you become a bit more compassionate with yourself, with others. You start understanding your parents better. You start understanding circumstances. You understand that there are two sides to each story. You know, I used to be really hateful and held a lot of grudges against my teachers and how they bullied me and how they talked to me. But now as an adult, I'm like, you know, I mustn't have been an easy kid to have in a classroom because I was always talking back. I was creative. I was jumping all around. It still wasn't okay what they did. And I can say with my hand to heart that I'm grateful for everything that's happened to me because it enabled me to become who I am. You know, people, some of my closest friends have all had some form of, you know, quote, you know, big T or little T trauma. I think it sort of, it gives you a different perspective on life and a different appreciation, you know, with people. And so the work that I do today, you know, whether it's speaking on a stage or working with a client, it really is around this idea of how do you show up as yourself, and how do you own the parts of you that you deemed unlovable or you deemed were unrelated to what you do, or maybe were scary to share. Like, how do you actually take those parts of you and make them the most compelling parts of you to connect with the audience so you can come across as a human leader? And I really love that. I really love that. And I think it stems back to those days where I felt like I couldn't be myself because I was dumb and stupid, because I couldn't read and I couldn't spell. So I felt I was wrong. And I had the shame that I carried around. And it took me years. And I talk about it very openly now. But up until my 20s,
I can imagine that's a journey. Yeah.
yeah, I had a lot of shame and stigma around it. Like, I wouldn't say to people that I was held back a year, or that I was kicked out, or that I did a technical baccalaureate. I didn't used to talk about it because I was ashamed of it. But then you kind of realize that the only way to move from shame to service is to own it.
I love that. Thanks for sharing. That's so powerful. And there's so many things we can unpack from that. But I think what's really interesting, it's just hit my mind now, is that what you've just shared there is that you're able to share all these things now. And the reason why it comes from a heart of love and to uplift people and to encourage people and to make other people the hero of their lives and their stories is that you took the time to do the internal hard work of seeing what's going on here and accepting it, loving it, giving yourself permission to process, heal, understand, and go through that journey where you can now talk about all these things openly. You share them in your messages, your books, your
It's still work in
speeches.
progress.
And of course, we're not perfect.
But
it's powerful enough.
Myself that I don't love myself, and I still struggle with it.
Sure.
But it's
I
true.
mean, we're humans.
Yeah.
And it's enough to make. But the beautiful thing is, whilst we're not perfect, it's
Yeah.
enough that what you've just shared has clearly made a lot of impact on other people because you've gone and shared it in your books and publicly, where you've given people now permission to go and own their own stories and go into their own lives and their shame and their pain. And of course, it's a journey. It's not a quick fix. Like, yep, that was because this happened. Now go share it on a
Sorted.
stage.
Yeah.
It's obviously a process,
Yeah.
but it's really powerful. So I really love it. Thanks for sharing. Let's
Mm.
delve in, for the time we have, Mark, to a bit of public speaking, because what I think is really
Mm.
interesting about your journey, what I really like, and I'm really a big fan of people who, they're pioneers, right? So when I look at your story, I see someone who wanted a job but didn't want to stand out with 100 written CVs, so he goes and makes a video one, and it goes flipping viral, million plus views, and he gets a job, like a dream job you were talking about there.
Mm.
I see a guy who had a TED talk scheduled, and 10 days before, he decides to change the talk because a lot of his friends, it's not hitting. The message isn't hitting with them. And one of your friends goes and tells you have this other idea. And he's like, yeah, you need to talk about that one, which is the classic TED talk. So 10 days, you reconstruct this new message. You're stressed out. It's crazy, figuring it all out. So what I want to do is delve into that day. And then maybe for the rest of the time, we'll see where we flow to. But I want to delve into that day, the TED Talk day. And I know you've spoke about this before on a
Yeah.
podcast, but
Yeah.
what I want to know is,
Oh,
what I want to know is the specific question I want to ask is, because I know you got there that day, you had 10 days before, you changed your message, you're freaking out, trying to perfect this new one. You get there on the day, the system crashes on your practice, the lights crash on your practice. The guy who talks before your talk is talking about the opposite message than you're about to share. So it feels a bit awkward. So I just want to ask you, when you look back at that moment now, what do you think, just walk me through that day, like what that taught you about public speaking, and why do you think that
so
resonated so much?
Well, I think to answer that question, I've got to take a second to sort of talk about what you just mentioned, which was, I'd spent 6 months preparing a TEDx talk. 6 months, right? Which was all about, through line of that one was, what you seek is clarity, what you need is trust. That was it. That was like my through line. Like, what you're seeking is clarity, what you need is trust. This whole idea of, like, you just need to trust the process. You don't need to have the whole picture. Just go. It will, you'll figure it out as you go along. That was like my thing. I had like a story of like a 3-headed dragon that you had to slay. It was like this whole thing, right? And on the build up to the talk, I decided to do 21 days of practicing my talk with a different friend at a different location, to reconnect with a friend, rediscover part of London, and get some input and notes on my talk. And that was one of the most soul crushing experiences, because every time I'd share it, I'd feel a little bit more dead inside. People were like awkwardly, they weren't quite sure how to give me feedback. Some of them were more honest than others, but I just knew it stank. Like, I just knew it wasn't. And the reason why, looking back at that, is that it was all theoretical. None of it was me. There was nothing about like my own experience to share with others, to serve and benefit others. It was very much like, I'm hiding behind this talk. And so, as you mentioned, I think it was 10 days or a week out. I go on Hyde Park Corner with Alex Mary, who'd helped me craft my talk towards my TEDx talk. I'd done one of his programs. And anybody who knows Alex, and if Alex, you're listening, he'll know this. He's got a terrible poker face, like terrible poker face. Like, I just knew as I was giving my talk that it was terrible. Oh my God. It was just, I looked at his face. I think I wrote in my book, like, it looked like someone took a shit in his porridge or something like that. And I said to him, before you give me feedback, let me give you this other idea that I've been speaking about recently. And it's just very rough and raw, but it was like this idea that I was fed up of entrepreneurship being glorified when it actually was really hard. Like, I just felt very inadequate in comparison to a lot of the stuff I was seeing online. Like, I was struggling to make ends meet. I wasn't getting as many clients as I thought I would. It was like working all the time, but no fun. Like, all this stuff that just didn't felt was being talked about enough. And so when I started sharing that, he was like, I think that's more in line. And so with 10 days to go, I just scrapped everything and rewrote this new speech. And I practiced it a few times. And Amrish Shah, shout out to Amrish, who is originally one of my brother's mates from university, who became one of my mates when we ended up living together. Well, not close to each other in South Africa. And Amrish had seen me do my last school play, because I used to do school plays at school. And then when I got to uni in my first year, I did a fourth year kind of drama play thing called The Pretenders, I think it was called, or I forgot what it was. Anyway, so he saw me, and I had a funny, stupid character in his play, right? So he'd seen me be quite funny, and like it was a serious drama, Greek tragedy, but then there was this buffoon kind of character. And so Amrish looked at me and was like, can I be honest? I was like, yeah. He's like, it's not really you. Like, you need to inject some of you. Like, you're funnier, you're more. And so I changed completely the start of my talk. So if you haven't seen the start of my talk, go and check it out. I talk about that as being a hook, right? Like, how can you hook your audience in the first 30 seconds? Well, really 5 seconds, but the first 30 seconds. And so that parody I did of an entrepreneur at the beginning, I practiced it with people. It was bombing. Nobody was laughing. So, but I believed that it was the right message. And oh my God, I remember taking the train to Cardiff. My partner was pregnant with our first kid at the time. She was pregnant with our daughter. And she's sitting in the train, and I'm pacing up and down the alley trying to remember these words, trying to remember the sequence of the text. I get to Cardiff. I haven't got an outfit. I go to I get a shirt, something. And my mum flew in from Paris to come and see me. And I'm in the hotel room, my mum and Julie and me, and I'm practicing these words, and I'm fumbling. And the day that the practice, the day before we could go in and practice if we wanted to, the whole system crashed.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it was a bit of a disaster, to be honest. I was just super stressed. And eventually, Julie, my partner, ripped out the script out of my hands. And she said, enough. Enough with trying to remember the words. You are the words. Like, like, connect to what you want to say, not the words you're trying to say. If that makes sense. It's like connect to the essence, like the message over the words, right? And so I went there the next day, and she'd given me a guitar pick. Unfortunately, I have no idea where it is, but she gave me a guitar pick, and it said something on the lines of, we're both in the audience with you, as in like our baby, like our future baby and her. And she said, keep that in your pocket. And I remember I was on the side of the stage. I was playing with this in my pocket, and people before me gave this whole talk about like, quit your job and start a business. It's the best thing in the world you'll ever do.
That is so funny.
And I was about to go in there and just say like, you actually starting a business is the worst thing you could probably do for your mental health. Really, like it's actually, I think there's an argument to be made that you can find purpose in working in an organization or working in a team, or you don't have to start a company to be happy. That was like basically, that was like one of the messages, right? And I'll be honest, I didn't imagine for a second or expect that it would do, and I put that well in air quotes because define what doing well means, right?
Sure.
But most TEDx talks do less than 1,000 views. Like the vast majority of TEDx talks actually don't get that many views. And so the really quick story I'll share on this, and this is about trusting your instincts, okay? There's a few times in my life when I've known, I can't explain it, I can't describe it, I just know, like there's a deep knowing. One of them was when I knew that a conventional CV wouldn't work for me, that I needed to do something different. I needed to do a video CV. Nobody was doing video CVs back then. It doesn't sound pioneering now, but back then everybody was laughing at me. Saying, like, you're going to film yourself? Talking to a camera about like your CV, like if you're in prison, you know? And so that was then. And then I knew in my gut that it was the wrong TEDx talk, that I needed to shift even 10 days out. Everyone said I was crazy. I should stick to my guns. 10 days is not enough to prepare for a TED. I did it. And the other one was when the organizers, I haven't talked about this a lot. The organizers sent me the video, right? To say, hey, your TEDx talk is edited. It's going to be released whenever it is.
Okay.
Or maybe they shared the released version. Aiden, like, it was 3/4 of the screen were the slides, and then there was a little bit of the video on the right of me walking kind of in and out of shots. And I almost cried. I was like, this is terrible. No one's going to watch this. Like, nobody's going to watch this. Like, it's visually like a nightmare. And I wrote back to them. I said, please go back to the production company. I will pay for the edit if I need to. You need to edit this and just have me full screen. And forget about the slides. The human connection and emotion is going to happen when people connect to the words I'm saying, not to the words that are written on a slide.
Sure.
And so I said to them, I'm just not going to promote this talk. If it's like this, I'm just not, because I know it's going to bomb. So they were graceful enough to bend to my demands and to my prima donna. But I think that would have been a very different result if that had been the talk. So that was another moment I just knew it. And so they sent me back the final version, and it went down in July 2017. And it really struck a chord. I think a couple of things, that helped. I used to answer to every comment on the YouTube. I don't do it anymore, but every single comment I used to reply. And I got loads of DMs and messages, people saying like, thank God, finally someone who speaks to my own experience, or thank you for saying the things that I felt out loud, but never had the courage to say. I think the bottom line of the really long-winded answer is having the courage in your convictions, and the belief that it was really, man, we haven't got time to go into it, but it was also super vulnerable. Like, I still am victim of this belief, but I'm trying to unshackle myself from it, which is like, I need to be perceived a certain way in order to be lovable and likable and be attractive to clients, right? Or to business. And so the idea of going on the stage with a potential platform that has the ability to go viral, it didn't mean that it was, but I was thinking more like 200,000. Like if I can get to like 100,000, I was like, that would have been a mega like achievement for me. Like,
Sure.
10,000 would have been good, but like 100,000 would have been exceptional. So I shared some stuff in that video which were vulnerable. Like, there was a particular day where I am sitting on my floor in my flat in Peckham and I'm crying because I'm looking at my mortgage statement and I look at my balance statement and they don't add up. And I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to pay my mortgage. So nobody really wants. Now there's more trauma porn and trauma phishing happening on social media, where people sometimes go over the other side. They overuse things to kind of get, you know what I mean? But back then it was much more taboo.
Yeah.
In 2017, my podcast was only 2 years old back then. And so I think that combination of courage, of practice, of passion, of truth, of all that stuff, I think is one of the reasons. And then luck, right? Like, let's not forget that there's a huge amount of luck that happened in the stars aligning and, my talk getting shared by people who had a bigger audience, and, it got featured in a couple of magazines, that kind of stuff. So a combination of luck and preparation.
Incredible. Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, I'm blown away, because I think what's really interesting is, on the outside, and doesn't this happen so often to so many of us? Like, on the outside, we're looking and we see, wow, 1.4 million views, incredible TED Talk. It blows up, changes someone's life. And behind the scenes, we hear the story, and it's so relatable. It makes you appreciate the journey so much more and realize people who've done incredible things behind the scenes. There's probably a lot of things and emotions and processes that we all go through. So I think it's just awesome to hear that, but also the lesson out of that, which is the courage to follow your instinct of what you, obviously for you in the moment, it was, okay, I'm going to do a TED Talk, and the big thing is what I'm going to talk about. And obviously you took a risk and had the courage to follow your heart. I think that's incredible. So I'd love to hear, before we wrap up, because I've always been interested, and then we'll kind of wrap up. Did that TED Talk, did it kind of take off and find momentum pretty quickly? And then in that next few months, did your life like change quite drastically because of that talk? Like, were there opportunities that opened and moments that opened from that, or was that kind of just a launch pad?
No, it was
for the
slow.
next?
Honestly, no, it was much slower than you'd probably imagine it to be. What it did do is that I'm trying to remember now, because obviously it's all a bit blurred. I'm trying to remember, when did I start speaking public and when did I start getting paid to speak? I think I'd done maybe a couple of gigs before that, I want to say. And then it was just a great asset to show people that I could actually talk on stage and galvanize an audience and inspire and all that kind of stuff. So, but it was definitely a slow, and still to this day, I get messages, like very random and very sporadic, but I still get messages to this day. And I think we both know Riley McGee. I think you know Riley McGee as well. So Riley McGee reached out to me because he saw the TEDx talk and ended up working with me because he seen that TEDx talk. So it did a lot of connections. Like, some people still to this day will hire me as a public speaker to go on stages. Very different message today, but because they saw my TEDx talk and they go onto my on my website, on markleruste.com, and they see what I do. And so it's not like I've heard stories of people like their TEDx blows up and then their life changes overnight. It wasn't so much like that. I think it was a slow and steady progress. It was 2017. It's kind of stalled around 1 million, 1.2 now, for the last few years. And I'm super grateful for everybody who's watched it and shared it. And I toyed with maybe doing another TEDx talk, but then I thought, what,
I want
I've kind of
my
got,
sanity now.
yeah, I mean, it's sort of like, been there, done, but I do love the power of a great talk well told,
Mm,
what a story well told can do. It never fails to amaze me.
amazing. Mark, it's been a pleasure. I know we're going to wrap up this podcast now, but thanks so much for jumping into your story. Last question for everyone listening. How
Mm.
does Mark, looking for the rest of his life now, what does success look like for Mark? What does that mean to him?
Very different. You go through life and you change that definition, I think. For me, this is going to sound really kind of cliched or weird, but it's going to my deathbed, making sure I didn't get my priorities wrong,
That's powerful.
that I didn't, because I hear this so many times, but that I absolutely squeezed every single moment that I could with my kids, because they grew up so fast. And my best friend Dennis Durochelle has this great sentence. She says, "The days are long, but the years are short." With kids, with young kids, and it really is true. Richard Branson said this. Someone next to him at a dinner. There's this story that someone was sitting next to Richard Branson, said, How do you want to be judged when you're gone?" And he said, "Don't judge me by anything I've built or any companies I've launched, but judge me by my kids' character and how they behave in life." And I really love that idea. I love that. I wrote something on LinkedIn recently about legacy, about this idea of that line in Hamilton: legacy is, planting a garden of which seeds you never get to see grow, or something like that. So I think, yeah, success is, and I really struggle with this constantly. I think it's a daily battle between what I think I should do, what I think others want of me, versus what I'm drawn and called to create. That, I think, is the tension that we must all walk and deal with on a daily basis. Obviously obligations, family, that kind of stuff. But I'd love to think that I loved fully, that the friends who can really count on me knew that they could count on me, that I created moments and experiences and memories for my family that will outlive me and my wife. Yeah, that I, do you know what? Success to me will be knowing that there'll be a day when I'll be at peace. I know it sounds really weird, but I'll be at peace with who I am, peace with what I've achieved, peace with, it's that always, I think it's a very difficult question to answer, which is how can you be both content while also still be driven? That idea of like,
It's like two sides of the same coin.
yeah, like how can I operate from a place of enough? I'm enough. I have everything and anything I could ever wish for, and I still
Drive
have
for
ambitions
more.
to make, not even like more for more, but like I still want to serve and I still want to make an impact and I still want to,
Sure.
you know what I mean? Like it's, but that
Mission.
voice that we spoke about at the very beginning of the podcast that I've had as a kid of like, you're going to prove them wrong. It's still there. Like I still am driven by that belief that I am not enough and that I still need to prove myself. So, on the back here, I've got a bunch of accolades and awards, and it doesn't fulfill that hole. Like, that need for validation that I'm enough and that I'm worthy is, stems from a long period of being bullied and sort of loyalty trauma when I was a kid. I'm still solving that. But I think I'd love to think that one day I can look at you in the eyes and generally say, I am 100% at peace with who I am, what I've done, where I'm going, what I've achieved. That, I think, would be the definition of success.
Wonderful. Sounds like some great metrics there, my friend. And yeah, it's been a pleasure. Been an absolute pleasure having you on. Thanks for taking the time to jump in, delve into your
Always.
story, sharing the good, the bad, the ugly. And yeah, just I personally learned so much just delving into people's stories, and I've got some great feedback. So I'm sure the listeners are going to take a ton from this as well. So Mark, it's been an absolute pleasure. Do you want to let people know before we wrap up how they can find you, how they can work with you, what you've got coming up that you want to get them involved with?
So if you want to check out what I do, go to markleruste.com. That's marklerust.com. And also Storycast. That's storycast.co. I'm sure it'll be in the show notes. You can check that out. And I'm no longer on any other social media apart from LinkedIn. That is the only platform that I'm on it. So feel free to come and say hi, DM me, tag me into, like, you know what I love? If you got anything from today, share what is the one nugget you got from a conversation on LinkedIn. Tag me, and I'll come and jump in and say hi. That'd be a lovely little way of interacting and engaging on the back of this conversation.
Perfect. All right, ladies and gents, you heard it. All those links will be in the description if you're watching on YouTube or listening in on Apple or Spotify. But thanks so much for tuning in to another episode of the Story Vault podcast, where I extract the gold from stories of experts, entrepreneurs, and thinkers and discover the secrets to their success. So until next time, Mark, talk soon.
Thanks again, Aidan.